The time is now. Welcome back to the Time is Now podcast. Thank God we could be here together today. On this podcast, we speak to entrepreneurs from all industries and figure out what makes them tick, where they came from, what business means to them, and how they achieve success. I'm Dr. Slava Shut, a doctor of physical therapy, serial entrepreneur, and your host. All right, welcome today, my wonderful friends. I have a great, unbelievable guest with you guys today. I'm very excited to introduce today Luca Tomescu. He's a Web3 developer who's worked for brands like Gucci and Shopify, a community advisor, and living his best nomad life. I'm excited to chat with him today, so let's get into it. So, Luca, tell us about yourself, and we really want to know, for those people who are technologically not inclined, what on earth is a Web3, and how'd you get into it?
Yeah, great question. It's certainly a bit of a long story, but I'll try to keep it short for the sake of you and everybody listening. So I'm originally from Romania, actually. Family moved to the US when I was super young. We lived in like 5 different states as I was growing up. And from a young age, just from moving around a lot, and especially growing up with my parents not having a lot of money, definitely lit a little bit of a fire under my butt to want to partake in improving my parents' situation and just making something of, our move to the US and all the opportunities that my parents came here to, essentially chase their own version of the American dream. And so even from a young age was just looking for ways to hustle and make some money. I was literally talking to my mom, I think yesterday, and we kind of had a good laugh about how when I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, I took a giant cardboard box, cut out a slot in it, and was selling lemonade out of our driveway where we lived in the Houston area. And then those ventures kind of pretty quickly ventured to the online sphere. Those were the early days of YouTube and eBay. And at least for me, I was born in 1997, so wasn't around at the very beginning, but it was new to me, man. I was in elementary school. And so I got pretty into buying and selling Pokemon cards on eBay, kind of made some money off of that. And then I eventually started a YouTube channel in the 4th grade that ended up getting a couple million views. And that was an incredible just kind of the realization that you could reach so many people online, you can make money doing things like that. And so that was something I always kept in the back of my head. And as I grew up, went through high school and college, just got very involved in startups, the tech world, I kind of realized that as a species of humans, a lot of our evolution was no longer biological as much as it was technological. And, definitely looked at the stories of Facebook and all these startups that you look back to. And I was I want to do that one day. And so, with that in mind, went into college really interested in building new companies, whether it's writing code, whether it's managing teams, worked with a bunch of startups, worked on several projects of my own. But this was all still pre-crypto days, pre-Web3. This is what I call nowadays just Web2, which is the normal internet that we all know and love and use every single day. And so as I was kind of starting my career in the tech world, I had kind of known about crypto in the background. To me, it was just kind of a financial asset that wasn't too dissimilar from buying stocks or commodities, which I was vaguely interested in at the time from a personal finance level. But about 1.5 years ago now, so not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, but in Web3 land, that feels like a lifetime. I literally had one night when I kind of literally went down the rabbit hole of this Web3 world and what it all is, learning what it meant and what was possible with it, with kind of this new age of technology that I felt was coming. And literally that night, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a space that I wanted to build my career in, focus my efforts and in my businesses working towards. And that was something where I could have never said that before. I was very much the type of person to jump around from one thing to another, just kind of following my curiosity and enjoying the journey as I went along with it. So it's been about 1.5 years now that I've been almost full-time in the Web3 space. So that brings us to the question of like, what the hell is Web3?
What is it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And frankly, I think the space needs to do a lot of work to just kind of rebrand itself in how we talk about it. But the way I think about it is Web3 is the collective term that we use to refer to anything that is built on a blockchain. So if I say the word like cryptocurrency, you probably think of Bitcoin or Ethereum, which is really just a financial asset that, like I mentioned, you can buy and sell not too dissimilarly from like stocks on the stock market. But that's just one element of Web3. Because if we just called things cryptocurrency, then we would only be thinking about the financial aspect. But there are a lot of other applications that you can build on blockchains. So another example of this is actually building like banking applications on the blockchain. That's what we refer to as decentralized finance, or DeFi, where instead of working through a bank like Chase or Wells Fargo to like store your money, to earn interest on your accounts, you can actually do that all through these programmable pieces of code that live on these blockchains. It can actually execute those commands for you. You can do similar things with, NFTs. You can literally put images on a blockchain that are managed and live on those chains. You can create organizations, clubs on chain. That's like DAOs. These are all kind of the different spheres of it. But Web3 kind of refers to this entire umbrella of what is possible of being built with blockchain technology.
So when we talk about business and entrepreneurship, how do you see, Web3 helping businesses, entrepreneurs, and I'm sure all around the world, because this is not just the United States. I'm assuming Web3 is everywhere on the planet at this point. So how does it help businesses and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, something I've been digging into a lot in the past couple of weeks and months is I think Web3 is kind of more of a thing. It's more of a game-changing technology in countries outside of the US and outside of the West. So something that I've been coming to terms with is that we have this problem right now in Web3 where we're in this stage that I think is very similar to the early stage of the internet, where no one was really sure where this technology was going. It was just a bunch of nerds playing around with it on their evenings and weekends and just kind of building things that they thought were like really cool and interesting, but no one was really sure like how this was going to expand and change people's lives. Like no one knew Facebook would exist, or Instagram, or Uber, or Shopify. No one could have envisioned those things. And I think we're kind of coming to this inflection point in Web3 where we're starting to come upon like the applications for this technology for businesses in the West and in developed countries. And the reason why I say this is because if you look at the usage of cryptocurrencies around the world, you're actually seeing much higher adoption in geographies like the Philippines, Vietnam, Nigeria, places that rely on this technology for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it's access to a financial institution outside of the one that a lot of these people were born into and essentially forced to participate in by virtue of where they're based. Number two, it's for getting access to just digital banking services in a lot of parts of the world. Like even where people have cell phones and cellular connections, they can't bank digitally at all. And number three, one of the original use cases for cryptocurrency is actually remittances, which, for any immigrants and any people with family abroad, that's a huge deal. Going from waiting a week or more to use Western Union and pay them a ton of fees to send money overseas to literally being able to do that with crypto in a matter of 10 to 20 seconds with minimal fees is a game changer. And so I've really been kind of transitioning my frame of mind with this Web3 technology that, unlike most technologies that really tend to have started in the US and kind of propagated outwards to the rest of the world, Web3 has what I call a reverse adoption trend, which is it's seeing much wider adoption in these emerging economies, these developing countries, where they actually have very strong foundational use cases for the technology. Whereas in the US and in the West, frankly, we're just lucky and we're privileged that we happen to live in the economy that is like the global basis and status quo that all other financial systems are kind of built around. So that's kind of how I've been reframing things because to be honest, even for me, like the last year and a half I've been in the space, I've found very few applications that are actually, like 10x better than the current incumbent, which, in startup world is kind of like the base value that you should try to overcome if you want to, beat out an existing technology. Some of the few examples where I have seen this, number one, there's this really cool and random platform for business banking called Meow. Basically what they do is it's just a business bank account that gives you 4% yield on your cash account. And this was pre like interest rates going up. So now everyone's offering 4%. But this was back even in like low interest rate days when the average was like 0.5%. And the way they're able to do this is they're able to actually on their back end, take their money or use your money, put it in something like Ethereum or Bitcoin, which collects this interest solely by validating these transactions as part of this blockchain and gives those earnings back to you. And so that's just a very simple tagline where you don't even have to know that it's like Web3 based. It's just 4% interest on your business bank account. Another really cool application for a startup that actually literally met with them like a week or two ago that I was researching into them. It's essentially a live streaming platform similar to like Twitch or YouTube. But actually to get access to these live streams, you either have to be holding like the creator's unique NFT, or it creates kind of new avenues for these creators to monetize like their work to their audiences, either like in real time on stream or kind of passively as they build an audience over a longer period of time. And I do think that, if we look at the use cases of Web3, level one is all those use cases I mentioned for people in developing countries, which is very standard kind of access to money and moving money around. Level two is really focused on creators, people who are writers, musicians, artists, and kind of gets into this whole idea of like the creator economy, which is essentially that these people struggle so much to make a living. Like in this day and age, it's purely off of advertisements. You see ads everywhere. Actually, I literally started like a secret podcast about a month ago. And like, the only ways we can monetize is to bring on sponsors or maybe to get lucky with some like referral or affiliate programs. And kind of the next level of use case of Web3 is you can actually create your art, your product as a digital asset, and you can either sell like pieces of that, you can sell copies of that to people as like unique instances of like a digital good, essentially.
So people, often don't really think about those other uses. People, when they think about, the concept of blockchain is crypto, right? And right now, the market's down. People lost a lot of money. And they're kind of negative about, the crypto and the blockchain space because, they associate one with the other.
Completely, yeah.
So, what do you think, especially when it comes to like security and sustainability? Are any of these claims that people have about the blockchain, are they any merit to them at all?
Yeah, that's a tough question because there are many, many claims out there. I mean, like yes and no. So I think one of the biggest ones is that there's like, a ton of like scams and people are trying to, what we call rug pull in the space, which is someone will launch a project and just kind of like vanish and ghost everyone. And those things definitely happen. And look, this is far from the first time anything like this has happened. So recently I was reading this book called Boom and Bust, which is basically a history of financial markets from the perspective of financial bubbles. And going back like 500 plus years, you've seen financial bubbles happen with everything from like the Dutch tulip craze to when the Americas were discovered and people created like fake companies to go and like find gold in South America where there was actually no gold. And this is definitely like a very real issue in the space. And it really comes down to each person who's like participating in it to look out for. But I think even more recently, right, like everyone looks to kind of the FTX fiasco and kind of what happened all around that, all these cascading effects in the ecosystem. If anything, that that issue is even more of an argument for like the foundational tenets of crypto and Web3, which one of those is self-custody. It's you actually having ownership over your assets and your money. You're not privy to a bank that's holding your money or some third party. And so in the case of FTX, so FTX was a platform where you give them your money and they're the ones to invest it in like the crypto and actually buy the crypto. And so you're trusting them. You're like, okay, Sam Bankman-Fried, I'm giving you $100 cash. I'm trusting that through FTX, you're actually using that $100 cash to buy Bitcoin and hold it on your balance sheets. Turns out that's not at all what was happening. And that's, a factor of FTX being a normal company with, a lot of the faults they ran into were just like corporate mishandlings, mismanagement. Like if you look at how they're actually running things internally, whether they were a crypto company or not, like they still would have ended up in a similar position where they are. But because it was crypto, it impacted so many more people and reached so much more widely than people expected it. And so I've been telling people this like since FTX came crashing down. If you want to be invested in crypto or if you want to hold those assets, you can hold those in your own wallet. You can hold them yourself, where the only person who has responsibility and is privy to those things is you yourself. Granted, there's some trade-offs there. So, there are like phishing attacks, there are like fake links, scams, things like that. So it is also a big burden of education on people who participate in the ecosystems to know those things. And even very high profile, very wealthy crypto people, like they fall for these things. It's pretty well documented. But as far as like people saying that there's like hacks and like what the blockchain is, things like that, as far as I know, those in particular are like very unfounded. The whole idea of a blockchain is that you have tens of thousands or even more of these computers or servers distributed around the world. And the way that you actually like add another block to that blockchain, which is really just saying that like Luca has $10 in Bitcoin, Dr. Slava has $20 in Bitcoin. The only way to like advance that and to send money and do these actions is for a like critical mass of the computers on that network to agree on the new state of this blockchain. So an analogy I like to use is, let's say that a blockchain is just a stadium, like a sports stadium with like 50,000 people. Every one of those 50,000 people represents what we call a node, which is just a server that like validates the blockchain. And let's say in the middle of the stadium is just a big like scoreboard that says that like Jeff has 10 apples and Nancy has 12 apples. And so in that scoreboard, if it shows that Nancy gives Jeff 1 apple and the new balance is 11 for each, a critical mass of those 50,000 people in the stadium have to agree that they witnessed that like event occur, that exchange of the apple, to establish this new like state of this blockchain that we've created. And so in order to like corrupt that process at that level of the blockchain, you would need to somehow get in and like infect literally like over half or critical mass of these computers. So it's at that point, like that is such high hanging fruit that the people who do want to scam or make money off of this in, less than ethical ways have way easier avenues to do this, do things like phishing attacks, sending fake emails, fake links, stuff like that. So there is a huge trade-off with self-custody, but there are also ways you can kind of mitigate that and just give yourself the best chance of protecting your funds.
Right. I mean, that's what we ultimately want to do. We want to make money and we want to protect our money, right? We want it to grow, right. But these things would definitely be a challenge. And, it's not going anywhere. It's probably right. More in an infancy stage than anything because something else will emerge. I tell people all the time, I may not understand crypto damn well, and I'm not a Web3 expert by any means, but I have a feeling not only is it not going anywhere, that we're still in such a low level evolution that we're not even sure what's going to come out of it. And I don't believe that Bitcoin is going to be the sustaining factor. I think something else is going to come out financially. There's going to be more
right.
use for it. and much more space done with it in many different ways. So it's going to be interesting. So, you describe yourself as following like a nomad lifestyle. Like nomad means different things to different people. Can you tell us a little more about that? And, what does it mean to you? And what's like an average day for you?
Sure. Yeah. I honestly, the two things that are constants and kind of the biggest pieces of my life are definitely Web3 and travel, nomading, whatever you want to call it. So this all kind of started shortly after like COVID hit. I was in my last semester of college. Obviously, things like the world just kind of changed overnight. Everything went online. A lot of things changed. And so as, I graduated college virtually, got into like the end of 2020, there started being this trend of people organizing these like co-living houses with like the pods of people that they were quarantining with. And so essentially, the idea was, hey, instead of being quarantined in like this city in our small apartments, why don't like 6 of us go get a nice cabin in the mountains in like Colorado or Utah or something like that? Right? It doesn't sound too shabby. And that way, like, you have access to wilderness, go hiking, do a lot of things that you wouldn't be able to do in, cities and towns otherwise at the time. And so, I would say I was one of the early people on that wave. Like I've been a avid traveler for, as long as I've been old enough to do it on my own. Was always very good about being scrappy, like finding the absolutely most affordable ways to travel both within the US and around the world. I've literally driven across the US more times than I can count at this point. I've flown to Europe for like $400 round trip, flown to Japan for like $500-600 round trip. There's definitely ways you can make it like sustainable, because I know the financial aspect is obviously a huge barrier to traveling. But I got really scrappy with kind of planning essentially these Airbnb houses. I'd plan these month-long houses or even more with groups of friends. And when we split out the costs, it was significantly cheaper than like the rent that we were paying in our apartments in Austin or in a lot of other major cities. And so that started a string of probably 6 or 7 months where I just hopped month to month, place to place. And I really enjoyed that lifestyle, but it also got to be very exhausting, because as soon as you get to a new place, you have to already start thinking about the next one. And I'm very much kind of the planner type of person. Like I love bringing people together. I love making things happen. But when it's all reliant on you to find the people, find the place, put the money down, like split the cost, et cetera, it's a decent amount of overhead. And around then I was kind of, starting like my first like real quote unquote job out of college. And it was a lot to do. So then ended up transitioning to getting an apartment back in Austin with my girlfriend. And luckily, as we like developed into just our careers over, those first like 2 or 3 years, we both became very just serious about like remote work. And as a result, we've kind of established this lifestyle where we spend about half the year on the road, generally like winters and summers. We'll spend in honestly wherever we're really feeling it. And then springs and falls, we'll stick home in Austin or take like shorter trips here and there. And so honestly, an average day in the life is not that crazy. I mean, right, like for the winter right now, I'm spending it in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, going skiing every weekend because I absolutely love skiing. And so, have organized like an Airbnb house for this. But, on an average weekday, I'm literally pretty much working from when I wake up to when I go to bed. I'm still eating normal meals. I'm still hitting the gym. It's really more having access to something on the weekends. And even like this past summer, my girlfriend and I spent like about a month and a half in Paris and traveling around Europe. And so on those weekdays, like maybe we try to hit a museum or a park in the mornings because we're working US hours, so afternoons and evenings. But, we're still very busy, very ambitious people. We both run our own businesses. And so it is tough, balancing the like productive, work hard, type A aspect of it with trying to make the most of exploring places. But I think that traveling in such a manner where you spend at least a month in a new place is a really incredible way to experience that place a little bit more like, a local almost, and a lot less like a tourist. And so that gives you, still a handful of weekends to go out and explore. And I have dozens of friends who've kind of done similar things. They've taken the angle where they've spent a month or two in like every US city they've ever been curious about living in. So they basically test drove what it would be like to live in like Seattle, in LA, in Boise. And then after like a year or two of that, they're like, all right, we like this place the most. We're going to, go get a lease here or buy a home here. So it's very unique. And I'm like a huge proponent of remote work. Definitely something that Web3 kind of encourages in a lot of ways. But even like coming out of COVID, for anyone working in tech, it's just an incredible privilege to be able to have, honestly. And I think one of my big goals is to help more and more people get non-technical jobs in either Web3 or tech so they can have access to this remote work lifestyle. Because I'm not like a developer day to day. I'm not writing code per se. And there's such a big need in Web3 especially, but in tech companies all across the board for people with these, what people call softer skills, but everything from project management to marketing to sales to operations. There's a huge need for that in Web3. And frankly, I don't think enough companies are like broadcasting those roles out enough. And they're definitely out there. And it got to the point where literally a couple of weeks ago, I decided to launch my own job board for non-technical jobs in Web3 to actually start, hitting that goal of, helping literally at least like 10 people get jobs in Web3, like get their first job in Web3 in 2023.
That's awesome. So you run what's called a Twitter thread club, which essentially gamifies tweeting and building a following, right? So how'd that start and how has it helped you and others?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's very much just kind of a pet project of mine that has gone really well, and I'm continuing to scale up and experiment with it. Essentially, I think it was 5 or 6 months ago, I decided to get really serious about Twitter in particular. I've never been a big social media person. I always kind of saw it as a waste of time. But as I got into the Web3 space, I realized that Twitter was kind of where Web3 happens, more or less. And, I was like, okay, I'll get on Twitter. I'll follow like the, big Web3 accounts. And I realized that actually Twitter, compared to a lot of other social media platforms, is pretty unique and special in that it's the only platform that really rewards people for their clarity of thought and their ideas versus like, how pretty they look or things like that. And also I realized that, the more just focused you are in your approach to Twitter, the more ruthless you are with who you follow, the more you can actually curate your experience there. And so I ruthlessly go through and only follow people who I'm really interested in the Web3 space. And it's become this incredible source of knowledge and information for me to actually stay up to date in the space and see what all is happening. And at some point I decided, I got a little bit tired of just being a consumer, very much have like the entrepreneur producer mindset. You don't want to just consume. You also want to start putting things out in the world. And I decided that Twitter was going to be the best place for me to do that because it was such a kind of gathering point for people in Web3. And as I'm wanting to build out my business and continue working like on freelance clients and things like that, I just figured it would be the best way to go. And so did a lot of reading, researching, gave myself like a self-taught course on just like how to approach Twitter, like how to grow on there. And admittedly, like I'm still relatively small compared to a lot of other people, but have made a lot of progress. And a big part of that has come from writing threads, which is basically like a series of tweets that together are almost like a miniature article. I learned that was a very effective way to grow on Twitter. And so I literally did a challenge where for like a month, every single weekday, I published a thread on Twitter, which, at the beginning, one of these threads would take me like 2 to 3 hours to write. So this was a pretty high lift to try to write quality. And I was just like going heads down. And I realized, this would be so much more fun and also effective, like with some sort of accountability group where it's like me and a couple of friends, and we all agree on the same goal of like hitting, publishing a certain number of threads on Twitter in the interest of growing our respective Twitter followings. And as I started thinking about that, I was like, okay, but what's a more interesting twist to this? Like, how can we work a little bit more like psychology, loss aversion, like all these kind of inherent biases that we have as humans into it? And so I came up with a system where essentially everyone dedicates a certain amount of money into the pot if you're part of Thread Club. So I think for the first one, it was everyone put in $100, me included. We all agreed on the same goal, which was to publish 3 Twitter threads every week for 4 consecutive weeks. And in order to get your money back, you would have to meet that goal. And if you didn't, you wouldn't get your money back. So there was that aspect of it. There's the fact that it was in a group, and some of the people actually felt like obligated to post because they didn't want to kind of fail in the eyes of the others. And then we also had a system of rewards where there were a few different like tiers of rewards that people could get. For example, one of them was who posted the most threads in that month. That person would actually get back more money than they put into it. So kind of having that as a way where if you really lean into this process in this group, then it can actually be something where you make money off of it, not just like avoid losing your money. And so actually the last week or two, I've been putting the finishing touches on kind of what I'm calling like V2 of Thread Club, and going to start kind of putting together the next cohort for that to probably start publishing threads and going through that together, sometime in February and then into March. So really excited to scale that up. And like the goal is to have this be kind of just like a system that, anyone who's interested in writing on Twitter or just leaning more into their Twitter writing habit, they can just sign up for the next cohort of Thread Club. They don't really have to put much more time or attention into it if they don't want to. There are definitely options for it, but ultimately it's a way for them to stay accountable to themselves and this goal that they've created, which is, been thinking about goal setting and daily habits leading up to those goals a lot more in the last couple of months as well. And I think trying to feed all of this like Twitter growth stuff through that lens that I think I've started applying to a lot of the goals that I have in my life.
What are hot takes? Because I have here that you tweeted a few hot takes, and then what are some juicy, controversial hot takes, if you could tell us, that spark some things up a bit, maybe
Sure.
more sassy and spicy?
Sure. Yeah, you've done your research. I'll give you props on that. The one that most readily comes to mind, as I was literally writing tweets like a day or two ago, was that I think like actively trading assets is just one of the greatest fallacies of the 21st century. I think the vast majority of the personal finance industry, so everything from like financial gurus to YouTubers to like MSNBC, I think that entire industry, it's kind of fronting as giving you access to information to make more like effective and wise financial decisions. But in reality, what it does is it convinces people into thinking that they're able to outperform the market. And even if you look at, 80% plus of hedge funds and et cetera, they fail to consistently outperform the market. And I'm coming from a background where, like I said, growing up with not a lot of money, got very interested in stocks and crypto and personal finance. And I'm a huge nut when it comes to like tracking my finances. And so I used to trade very actively, like stocks, options, like not a lot of money, but whatever money I had. And, I made some money, I lost some money, but ultimately I realized that that's like in 99.9% of cases, that strategy is not going to pay off. And B, even in that 0.01% of the time that it does pay off, is it really worth the peace of mind that you're sacrificing by constantly stressing about the open positions you have and like the options that you're holding? And I've had times when I just couldn't look away from charts and I could just feel myself like my soul was leaving my body. I felt unhealthy. I felt unhappy. And especially, now as I've grown a little bit older, in the last couple of years, just realized like how much that peace of mind is worth to me. And that is worth more than enough than this small chance of making outsized returns from investing. So even when it comes to, I buy stocks on pretty much all like ETFs, and then I do buy a good amount of crypto, but really just like large cap coins for the most part. Like even all of that, I have on autopilot, I'm dollar cost averaging. And I just think you have to think about not only the ROI on your money, but the ROI on your time and your happiness, because that's not worth sacrificing those things. And then I'll give you what I've been told is a hot take specifically for like Web3 and crypto, which I honestly think is pretty cold at this point personally. But it's that the blockchains of the future will be invisible. What I mean by that is at the end of the day, this Web3, this blockchain technology that we're talking about, this is a back-end technology. What that means is that it's up to like the engineers and the people building the products to figure out how it works, but it should not be up to you, the user or the consumer, to understand that technology. And so many Web3 products, so many, of these projects that people are building, they'll often say something like, "Oh, we're like X, but with Web3." They'll be like, "Oh, we're like Netflix, but with Web3." And the fact of the matter is that unless you're a Web3 nerd like myself, you're just not going to care. And you shouldn't be expected to care or to take on like a second full-time job, essentially, of having to like learn how this space works. And I'm seeing a lot more of this trend, which I'm really excited for, of what people call Web 2.5, which is how do you build products that have a Web3 backend, actually use that to drive more value or more unique features to users, but to users, the front end, like the website or the app that they're using, should look and feel as familiar as what they're already using in Web 2. And so we've already seen some excellent examples of this. So a big one was a couple of months ago, Reddit came out with NFT collections for their like Reddit avatars. They did a great job of how they pitched that as like not real, like in the back end, they are NFTs, but they don't like call them that. They're not trying to pitch people on NFTs. They're pitching people on, hey, you have this unique avatar on Reddit that only you have. And if you want to trade it, if you want to sell it, cool, you have the power to do that. Something else that I'm really excited about is Starbucks Odyssey is kind of their, it's like a Web3 enabled like course that they're coming out with where you can like sign up for it. It's like half loyalty program, half like learning about like how the coffee is actually made. But the idea is that like as you go through like the steps in this like loyalty program, as you become like, a more loyal like Starbucks customer, you actually get unique benefits that are using a Web3 backend, but to you, you're just using the Starbucks Odyssey app to get perks in store, to get discounts on your coffee, to get free stuff. And those are some applications that I'm really excited about. And I think will do a good job of paving the way, especially as at some point we enter the next bull market where inevitably interest will come rushing back into crypto, and people want to either make money or actually like understand the technology and what you can do with it.
Anything that has potential money making and quickly, as definitely piques people's interest. It's interesting, and there's a lot going on. And we thank you for giving us the technology and the technical aspects of this, because, I'm sure, like I said, this is an infancy, so not everybody knows about it. This is not a household name. This is not a gold standard yet. And there's many applications to be found. So, do you recommend a particular place to learn about Web3 for those who are Web3 challenged?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll recommend two things, one very selfishly, one more selflessly. Number one, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Luca_Tomescu. A big part of what I think about, what I write about, what I work on is bringing Web3 technology to Web 2 brands and people, and ultimately trying to break down, some cool products that are out there that you might not have heard about, and doing it in as plain English as possible, trying to really pull back those curtains to Web 3 that I felt were pulled back from me when I first read about the space, and legitimately have never felt like my mind was blown so much. So try and deliver that to people just as much. And then there's a newsletter that I absolutely love called The Milk Road. And what it is it's a daily newsletter on what's happening in Web3. So like current events, news, things like that. But what they do extremely well is they write it all in completely plain English. Wow. And I'm telling you, I've never had a newsletter where I laugh out loud when I'm reading it sometimes. And the writers of this newsletter do a fantastic job of putting in jokes, like they know their target audience very well. And you could pick up, any issue of that newsletter like every day. It takes 2 to 3 minutes to read. No buzzwords, no fancy terms, just kind of tells you what's happening in the space and written at a level that probably like a fifth grader could understand. So my day-to-day like news in Web3, I get from there on a high level. And then a lot of the micro is from Twitter itself, which I don't think is worth most people's times. And I've had to work really hard to cultivate the information diet that I want from Twitter. And it's taken me months and months to do that. And so I think there are just ways you can short circuit that with the newsletter, like the Milk Road. And there's a few other aggregators of data. Sorry, there's a few other aggregators of information out there as well in Web3.
Thank you for simplifying such a complex and technical subject. I mean, we appreciate it. I mean, sometimes, it's tough. I'm sure you find yourself saying the same thing over and over again at times and trying to teach, people who are technically challenged a challenging thing. So, we thank you for, educating us and the public on this. And any other plugs you want to give yourself? That way people can find you and talk to you and ask you questions and, go ahead, plug away.
Great. Yeah. I mean, first off, thank you so much for having me. Hope that I did a good job of explaining things. I do try to challenge myself to explain it a little bit differently every time to just A/B test, what works the best and what doesn't. So if you think I did a great job, if you think I did a horrible job, you can just reach me on Twitter. That's the one and only, just Luca_Tomescu. And through there, you can find links to my job board for non-technical roles in Web3. If you're looking for your first job in Web3 or just want to learn what is up with the space, Thread Club, if you're trying to start your Twitter writing habit, no matter how small you are, no matter what topic you're writing about, that's all through my Twitter and the link in the bio there. So hope to see some of you there.
Thank you so much, Luca, for being with us. That was awesome, folks. Get with it. This is the future. It's not going anywhere. Because if you think you don't want to learn any of this because somehow it's going to magically disappear, I think we have an expert here today who will tell you, and I'm no expert, I'm going to tell you it's not going anywhere. Not only is it not going anywhere, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of its capabilities. So learn, go out there, reach out to Luca. I'm sure he'll be happy to explain this to you in 100 different ways. If one doesn't work, the 100th may. So, we are animals of repetition. So learn. This is not going anywhere. We're going to have a good use for it. And thank you so much, Luca. Appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, thank you as well, Dr. Slava. This was a lot of fun and hope everyone learned something. If you're confused, literally just DM me on Twitter. I reply to every single DM I get. I'm fortunate to still be able to do that. So more than happy to answer questions, send you resources. And I love asking people, what are you trying to learn more about in Web3? So can hopefully write about it and help you and 100 other people in the process.
Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to DM you because this is like a completely foreign language all mixed together with hieroglyphics and like smoke signals and everything. It's a lot. I mean, I don't feel old until I start talking about this kind of stuff. So again, thank you, man. It was appreciated. We'll definitely be reaching out with some questions because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening, make sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you for listening to The Time Is Now with me, Dr. Slava Shut. Remember to tune in every Friday at 2 p.m. and send in your questions to Dr. Slava Shut on Twitter. Thank you, thank you, thank you.